Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Bray, and welcome to episode 32 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show, brought to you this morning by our good friends over at MyTech, who provide bank-grade identity verification with the highest possible assurance levels, massively reducing risk, fraud, and costs. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday, straight into your homes at 8:30 BST. Here, live only on LinkedIn Live. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Janet Hitchen. Janet is the founder and consultant at Janco, but before that, spent many years at the technology giant Apple as their internal head of strategy communications. I think I murdered that title there, Janet, but we'll come back to it at some point.
No bad.
Today, what we're going to be doing is catching up with Janet about internal communications in the age of COVID-19, her journey through Apple, and what she's been getting up to now. So, Janet, how's it going?
It's going really well. My dog doesn't do anything crazy while we're talking. But no, I think I'm actually quite dare I say it, enjoying lockdown life. I've got, Zoom yoga. I've got the theatre every Thursday night. Rose keeps arriving at my door. It's great.
What more can you possibly want at that stage, right? What more can you possibly want? So as always, guys, we love getting your questions. If you've got any questions for Janet, if you've got any questions for me, if you've got any tips for how to keep dogs quiet during live streams, all of that would be welcome on LinkedIn right now. One thing that I should say, this week we're going to be collecting all of the questions and the comments that we get through, and at the end of the week what we'll be doing is choosing the best one, the winner that we have through it. The person who wins that with the best question, the best comment, whatever it is, will be rewarded handsomely with FinTech Insider Breakfast Show swag. So winners will be announced during the stream next Monday. So get your thinking hats on and keep those questions coming, and we'll be monitoring them. Myself, Bianca, Olivia will be going through those and making sure we pick out the best one for you next week. So enough of me talking anyway. So Janet, let's hear a little bit more about you. Maybe if we can start a bit with your background. I mean, you've worked in financial services and Apple and a few other places. Do you want to just walk us through your background a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So when I started my proper career, as I term it, I started working at Crédit Agricole, and I was working in Paris in the human resources department. I eventually came back to London and was working again in the human resources department, doing a lot of employee engagement, a lot of employee experience project stuff, and was asked if I wanted to start the internal communications function because of the work I'd been doing on employee engagement. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to a talk at the London Business Forum by the guy who was at the time creative director of Innocent, and I was blown away. I thought he just rocked. I thought he was amazing, and unlike anything I had seen so far in financial services. And I kind of made a decision: I want to work for somebody like you, or I want to work with organizations that do things like you. And I then put that out to the universe and applied for a job at Apple, and 16 interviews later I got the job at Apple Retail. And then 8 years after that, I actually did work with the creative director at Innocent for a couple of months while he was at Apple.
Oh wow, small world, hey? I mean, good. One thing there, Apple have a very stringent interview process, clearly, in terms of that amount of interviews to kind of get through it. I mean, what was the experience like working there? They're famed for getting comms right publicly, but is it a similar kind of vein in terms of the internal view with how Apple kind of runs?
So I was working on the retail side, so European retail stores, and then eventually it was retail online and bricks and mortar that were brought together. And I was brought in at the beginning because we were setting up the internal communications function for retail, and we were splitting communications from operations. So the idea was that we were moving to what we could, everyone knows, a business partner model, more strategic, less reactive, and less operational. And so it was a balance, and it was a learning process throughout that. I mean, we were incredibly lucky in that we had great tech to work with. And from the very beginning, I think after year one, we launched a platform which was on iPad. And at the time, it wasn't an intranet. It was a sort of like a magazine that had an operational side, and it also had a sort of a storytelling side. And nobody else had anything like that at the time. Everybody in store was able to then have that iPad, and it meant that they didn't have to sit at a Mac. It meant that there was more opportunity, more flexibility for people to get access to that, to the tablet, and then the apps on that tablet. And now in store, I think they have, it is device agnostic, the tool that is used. So it can be on a phone, it can be on a Mac. So the guys in the contact centres are actually, you know, sat in front of a screen. They've got the app available. Anybody that's in the store can have the app available, even on the shop floor. So huge amounts of stuff that we did, huge amounts to try and put the employee at the heart of what we were doing and make sure that the employee experience was as good as it could be, so that they could pass that on to the customer, because the customer experience was everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you've had, like, say, financial services, you've had Apple experience. I mean, we were joking a second ago, just offline. I mean, last time me and you caught up, I think I was about an hour late for my next meeting because we just sort of got so deep into this. But comms is such a, internal communications is such a misunderstood thing. You know, I think people don't really understand its importance enough. Why is that? You know, why is it sort of you know, I've sort of said with a few people internally at 11FS before, it's the places I worked at in the past, like almost internal comms is where they put marketeers that they didn't quite know what to do with. And that's completely the wrong approach. But why does internal communications get such a bad hand, do you think?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think right now there's no standard reporting line for internal communications. So depending on the organisation, depends on how they view internal comms. So some organisations see it reporting directly into the people function, and they see it as a very people-centric, employee engagement, employee experience style operation. Other places see it with the corporate comms team, and with the corporate comms team, then it becomes more, or with the marketing team, and then it becomes more about making sure that the external message and the internal message are aligned, and making sure that that internal audience is continually kept in consideration, instead of just going straight out with an external message and everybody else finds out about it on Twitter, for example, which has happened during this pandemic, unfortunately. So I think the reporting line is a major challenge because it's completely seen in different ways. I see it as well as having a very commercial aspect. So internal communications for me is about putting the employee at the heart of whatever it is that you do, but knowing that you are creating a great employee experience for that customer experience and for whatever commercial aim that it is that you have. So you may, you know, at Apple, we might have a commercial goal target within Europe. And it's then understanding, how do you do something for your team? How do you do something in employees that will engage them, galvanize them, and inspire them to act, to do something that will actually support that commercial goal, without it being obvious that there's a commercial goal behind it at all. Not talking about the commercial goal in the slightest, but knowing that that's where you're going. So I think until we get a couple of things nailed, I think until we get that reporting line figured out, then I think that there's going to be some challenges. But good news is, during this pandemic, internal communications have been one of the most important functions within an organization, because how do you tell your people what's going on? How do you inform your people? I mean, good comms is you inform people, you connect people, you inspire people. So it's been about, how do you actually inform people? How do you get the right information to them at speed? Because if you're sort of faffing about and you're a day late, the world has completely changed. The message has completely changed. What was true yesterday is not true today. And so it's making sure that people have that information, that connection, that information that then enables them to then move to the next layer, which is connection. Right now, it's not about inspiring, but having all of that and having the right tools in place and channels in place that allows people to understand where to find what they need fast, so that they can either do their job or not do their job, or whatever it is that the company wants them to do or feel, is the most important thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think bad comms in a company is a symptom of a broader cultural issue, isn't it? I think if you sort of see, I've seen many organizations sort of treat internal communications almost like propaganda rather than necessarily real transparency around it. And as you say, given the sort of pandemic that we're facing right now, then information and being I always sort of say it's like a maths exam. You only got 1 mark for the answer and you got 99% for the showing the working out. And I think the best communication for me is showing people the working out and actually showing people the journey that the organization goes on to make decisions around things. And I think to your point, there is a big commercial angle to that in many instances, because if you really want your organization to be evangelical of your products or your services or the things that you do, then actually you need to show them all of those things, isn't it? And I think at Apple, this is one of the things that every Apple employee will be so evangelical of products or services or capability, because they've been taken on that journey and they understand the benefits, they understand what went into them to make them able to kind of have those kind of conversations, don't they? So it is interesting. I think so. Where would you sit comms then in an organization? Because I guess there's to your point, it could sit in marketing, it could sit within the CPO people style function. It could be a completely separate thing in its own right, couldn't it? But where do you think it best sits to have the biggest impact, do you think? Or do you think it's more about the targets and the KPIs than really where it sits?
Where it sits does affect it, because there is a slant. There's definitely, if you sit in people, it is very different from if you sit in corporate communications, and there is a very different slant on it. I think for me, I think what you said earlier about leadership and leadership understanding of what internal communications can do and the power that it can have, and how do you use that power to harness all of those employees that you have within your organization? Because those employees will, as you say, they're employee advocates. They will talk about your product outside, they will talk about it with their family, they will talk about it with their friends. And why would you treat your employees worse than you treat your customers? I've often found that very bizarre. Why would they get the sort of the second class citizen style when actually they're inside your organization? And what you should be doing and could be doing is giving them some behind the scenes stuff, some secret stuff that nobody else knows. So the customer and the outside world gets something really cool. But also what happens is inside that you then tell the story of how that happened, where that idea came from, where did it originate from, who was the creative mind that came up with that story, do an expose on them, all that kind of cool stuff that you could talk about. I think there is huge opportunity to do that. So I've often said I don't care where it sits. I think what I care about most is that it's understood, that leadership get it. And then just another point that you were talking about then before, what's really interesting now in the pandemic is internal communicators previously have been using leaders, and it's, they've got perfect camera angles and perfect lighting and perfect this, and there's a whole video production behind it that costs a lot of money. Now what's happening is people are just jumping on their iPhone and doing a live, and there's a great deal more authenticity and there's a great deal more vulnerability. And it's one of those things where you think, you know what, it's actually okay if you get it wrong a bit, because we're all human. And right now, nobody's been through anything like this before. So having that kind of vulnerability that you're sharing actually makes you more human. Sorry, my AirPod keeps falling out. That's not good. Is it?
I mean, you start talking about vulnerability and being authentic, and your AirPod falls out. I mean, you're just proving the point, aren't you? It's props as much as anything else. I mean, I completely agree with that. I think the style of communication is so important. It's not just the message; it's the medium of delivery, isn't it? And I think to your point, I think internal communications. And actually, I mean, we're seeing this. There's a good comment actually on LinkedIn by Deval Gore from the Mayor's office. Do you think that comms by governments and health agencies, such as the WHO during this crisis, has been delivered well? And that probably speaks to that point. It feels like governments suddenly feel a bit more human. Not all of them, I should add. A few of them are still definitely reading from very well prepared scripts, aren't they? But
Yeah.
seeing Boris Johnson doing holding his phone out and doing a candid video to have a conversation, it feels like you're more connected to people than ever, doesn't it?
I think my favourite is Jacinda Ardern. I think that woman is phenomenal. The way she's acted and the way her communication style is, she's already incredibly empathetic. But some of the stuff that she's doing is absolutely phenomenal. I think I blogged about it a couple of weeks ago when she did in a press conference, she answered a question about the Easter Bunny. I struggle to see some of the leaders in certain countries, responding to that question and taking it seriously. Sure. And the way she spoke directly to children. And I think we've also seen that, and I can't remember which Nordic country it was. It was Norway, Sweden, or Denmark. I really can't remember. But there was also one of their leaders who also did exactly the same thing. And she did a press conference for children. And that is phenomenal, because she's looked at the audience and said, right, okay, who am I talking to? Am I talking to every part of my audience? Hang on a minute, there's this whole group here who I haven't spoken to. I'm going to speak to them. And again, what is coming, sort of circling back to what I said before, it's, in internal comms, you put the employee at the heart of what you're doing. Here they've said, who's my audience? Who are my people? Who is the population? I'm going to make sure I don't miss them out. And I thought that was incredibly powerful, because it just showed the thought that had gone into making sure that the whole population was engaged with and felt connected, felt part of that, and felt that they were connected to what was happening within their country. And I thought that was incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like I say, knowing your audience and tailoring your communications to them is really critical, isn't it? I mean, a lot of big corporates that I've sort of worked in the past, internal communications was really like an email. Do you know what I mean? So like their internal communication technology was email, and the idea of how internal communications communicated to everybody was an email to 100,000 people. There's a bit more nuance to it than that, isn't there? Clearly, but yes. And communications internal to organizations has changed quite dramatically with the advent of Facebook for Work or Slack. Are you seeing these tools kind of changing how internal comms works, or changing the dynamic of internal communications to organizations as a whole?
Yeah, I think when you look at how the way we communicate, just as humans, has changed, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I think I read today that TikTok is the most downloaded app ever in the last month, which is sort of mind-boggling. My
wife literally loses at least an hour a night on TikTok. Like 7-second videos, an hour of them back to back. Like it's quite scary, but it's very addictive how they've set it up, isn't it?
It is. It's incredibly addictive, and also, I'm slightly obsessed with all of the dog videos, obviously. So if you look at that and you look at the way we communicate as people, internal communications has to keep up with that, because that's the way people communicate. Where do you get your news? Where do you get your information from? And a lot of people now get it. You don't necessarily get it from the big bulletin on at sort of 6 o'clock on the BBC or wherever you might get your news bulletin. You don't necessarily get it there. Not that I'm a huge proponent of scrolling news, because gosh, there's a lot of it and it doesn't help people's anxiety levels. But I think what we've now had to do is everybody's had to move. So yes, you've got Workplace by Facebook, you've got Slack, you've got lots of different other enterprise, what are now called enterprise social networks, or ESNs. Love a good acronym. And it's how that mirrors how you communicate within your day-to-day life. And if you're used to, I think we one of the things that I did at Apple a while back was we did a workshop with some of our employees, and we actually mapped their journey. And when do you find out news? How do you find news? What do you use? And it was really interesting, sort of mapping somebody's journey from the moment they wake up to the moment that they arrived at their job. And what were they using? Were they using a computer? Were they using their phone? Were they using an iPad? Were they talking to friends? Was it coming through WhatsApp? How was this information coming through? And that made us realize you have to follow what people's natural behavior is. And if you follow that natural behavior, then your internal communications will be more sticky, because you're not trying to create a brand new behavior and force something new or something antiquated onto somebody.
It is interesting, isn't it, when an organization sort of at the front steps expects you to start acting like it's 20 years ago rather than today, isn't it? And I think that sort of time machine at that front door can often cause a lot of those problems, can't it? But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? What do you sort of think in these times? Obviously, when we're talking about a communication from the organization to employees, but actually from employees to employees as well, facilitating comms there is really important, isn't it? Particularly in these times of everybody sat at their own home. There's many people who sort of miss out on those water cooler kind of conversations, or the bumping into somebody at a corridor, or the first 5 minutes of a meeting. There's a good comment here over on LinkedIn from Raoul. So in times where the close contact is hard, how is internal communications changing to adapt to this? I mean, you can't just approach somebody's desk informally, and neither can you see in case somebody is a bit off at the time. I mean, there's definitely something, given so much of our communications now is online. Context, and I mean, context as in like tone is so important, isn't it? How do you propose sort of people kind of address that? Because I think it's a major problem for many people who are texting constantly rather than really talking to each other right now.
I think it's about being more mindful about how you're communicating. So instead of just dashing off a text or dashing off an email or dashing off a Slack message or whatever it is that you might be doing, it's about taking that time. So, if you're going to have a Zoom meeting, then you take the first 5 minutes to find out how everybody is. Or you, one of the things, because I've had remote teams before, and one of the first things I used to do was every morning I would send a message, go, "Morning, how are you doing?" Just very simple connection. The stuff that if I had been at the coffee machine or the tea, making myself a cup of tea, and that person had been stood next to me, I would have said that. So why can't I do that as just a normal human being? Spending the first 5 minutes of a Zoom meeting saying, "Hey, how are you?" and actually listening and stopping and listening. And if someone's saying, "You know what, today I'm just not feeling it,"
yeah,
going,
I mean,
okay,
that's a massive
how
point.
can I help you?
Yeah,
I'm just empathizing.
Well, that's the thing. Communication is mostly listening, isn't it? It's not just broadcasting internally things that are happening there, or not listening to the response that you're kind of getting from those things. I think it's. I mean, I'm a sucker for smiley faces and emojis. Quite frankly, it's very hard to take the tone wrong if you litter. And I know if anybody's listening to this from 11FS, you'll know that literally I don't use full stops. I use smiley faces because it's like you make sure that you set the tone of what the sentence is so that people know you've got positive intent in terms of the things that you're doing. There's a good comment here from Lucy Heavens. I agree with the raw style of communication is great for today, but in about 6 months' time, when we're back in the office, do you think this type of content and style will be still acceptable? What do you think?
Yes. Yes, I do. A lot of organizations now that do use things like Workplace by Facebook are already moving to their senior executives doing lives. So providing that behind the scenes content. So somebody who is at a big conference before they go on is doing a live. Really simple, really quick, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and out it goes. So that style of communication will still be, I think, embraced. I think there will still be, and it will be interesting to see, will people go back to doing some sort of very standard style stuff? But what's interesting there is then going to be talking to employees and listening to them and saying, did you enjoy it? What did you like? Is this what you want? Do you care about this? Is this the best way to get that information out? And so it's working with your audience to say, is this what you want? Does this work? Does it feel too scripted? Did you not enjoy that? I think people understand if something is scripted, if there's something very specific messages that need to get put across, and it's quite complicated. And as long as that person says, look, I've got some stuff written down here, and I just want to figure out and make sure I don't forget anything. So there's almost a more of an honest way of doing the same thing. So I think there'll be some trial and error. I think they'll be playing about with it. But I do think there will be more of an honesty in the sorts of communication that we see, and not something where someone delivers some incredibly complex message and is supposed to have, just memorized that. I think having that openness, having that honesty, I think is going to be really still very powerful. And when this is all over, I mean, that could be 18 months, that could be 6 months, that could be, who knows when that is. So I think learning along with our audience, what's working for them, what are they appreciating, what are they learning from, what are they getting the most from, that is huge to then sort of loop back and say, okay, that worked, that didn't. We dump the stuff that doesn't work, and we keep going with the stuff that does, and we keep trying new things.
I mean, it's difficult if an organization or a leader of a company hasn't up until now been delivering candid, authentic, honest communication. In this period, it must feel quite jarring for them to do those things. I mean, if you kind of think a lot of CEOs of big banks, the speeches that they write, I've known many who all of the speeches are written for them. They are the actor delivering these things rather than necessarily the author delivering their words. But I kind of feel I completely agree with you. I hope that many of the veneers that we've sort of seen in the past of these things, now that it's been forced to go away, people are realizing that actually there's a massive benefit to just speaking to humans like humans, isn't there?
Oh, why would you speak to anybody any differently? I think, we're all human, we're all normal, we're all in the same, we're all, in the same company. So why would you not just talk to everybody like a human being? I think it is that two-way piece. It's putting stuff out there, learning from it, learning back from it from employees, and allowing employees, you mentioned it earlier, allowing employees that sort of almost citizen journalism, what are the things that are coming up? There are some challenges with citizen journalism at the moment because everything moves so fast. So are you timely enough? Are you speedy enough to get the information out there? But I think using your people and telling great stories and telling stories of things that work, is there one team that's having an amazing time doing something that everybody else could learn from? Then share it, share those pieces so that everybody else can learn from them. Did somebody have a Friday Zoom meeting which actually worked so brilliantly because they all did something and it was so hilarious or so much fun that you want to share that so that everybody else does? Some people might go, you know what, that worked for me. Other people might go, you know what, that's totally not our team. That is not our team vibe. That is not what we do. But it's allowing that sharing mechanism and allowing people to learn from each other as we're going through this, because some people have got great ideas. Some people are just like deer in the headlights. And as I said before, some people wake up thinking, yay, this is a great day. And some people think, oh God, okay, I'm going to have to do today. So what can you give them to support them and help them? I think, that it's we're not all in this together in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. We're all in different boats, and you can help each other. That's what internal communications and those channels can sometimes facilitate.
I agree. I mean, I hope out of this, given the benefit many organizations are sort of seeing from doing it in a different way, that will be the learning and that will be the change that we'll sort of see in the industry. Do you think post Corona and like you say, people sort of getting back into the office eventually, then do you think the industry will change because of this positively, hopefully?
Yeah, I think so. I think getting back into the office, who knows what that's going to look like? And I think it's Thursday, isn't it, that the government's going to be putting out its proposals, although BuzzFeed did do an article saying that it had got all 8 proposals last night. I think there will be a lot of change. I think there's already been a lot of change. And I think that change will continue. I don't think we will all be charging back into the office for anytime soon. And for anybody that lives in London or anybody that commutes on a packed train, how confident and comfortable are you going to feel, jumping back on the Central line? Personally, I'm not looking forward to that in the slightest. But
Yeah,
no,
I
I
mean,
do think there will be some change.
wearing a full face mask in July on the tube is going to be somewhat disgusting, isn't it? But so yeah, I think it's going to be a gradual return to the office. But I mean, it'd be nice to get back into London and get back on with jobs. But all right, guys, yeah. I'm afraid we're coming to the end of the time that we got. We've come to the top of the hour, so I'm sure we've all got things to do. And Janet, I mean, last time I was about an hour late for my next meeting, but I've definitely got to get on today, unfortunately. So thank you so much for joining us, Janet. Where can people find out more about you and what you're getting up to these days?
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn right now.
Fantastic. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today. Stay safe and see you tomorrow, where we'll be joined by Dennis Govan, who is the Chief Executive Officer over at Mox Bank over in Hong Kong. Sure to be a really, really interesting conversation. They've been up to some really great things. I'm really trying to get my hands on one of those cards as well, because they look rather pretty, I have to say. If there's anybody else that you want me to get on the show, then tag them in the comments. Let me know on email. I'm david@11fs.com. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thanks.